Yet despite the theater of the day, New Brunswick's car still isn't ready for production. Few beside Hatfield and Bricklin realize that the car on display is handmade. In September of 1974, the first Bricklin finally rolls off the assembly line in St. John. In New Brunswick, the excitement is palpable.
I had people phoning me, trying to lobby to see if I could move them up on the list of people that were waiting to buy a Bricklin car. There were a lineup of people. There were hundreds waiting.
But production is still plagued with problems. Although the line is moving, the gull-wing doors and the body are still bleeding the company dry.
The doors themselves are the car. They are the sex of the car, they are the appeal of the car, and they are the grief of the car.
At the Minto plant just north of St. John, there's also a crisis. This is where the revolutionary acrylic body is being manufactured. But not only is it proving hard to make, no one can work out how to glue parts to it.
They called the new car SV1 for Safety Vehicle 1. Despite the rush job, the final design turned out well, with an edgy, aggressive, futuristic profile. Compared to the lumpy, frumpy cars of the mid-70s, this styling looks a full decade ahead of its time. And as much as I love hood ornaments and chrome trim and vinyl roofs, I also really like the Bricklin's no-frills aggressiveness. My only complaint is that the rear bumper does look a little chunky. But we'll come back to that. But the car still had a long way to go before it could be built. A large portion of the initial loans went not into manufacturing, but into finishing the car's engineering. A firm called AVC Engineering created the chassis for the SV1, overseen by Herb Grass. True to its name, safety was integral to the design, including a built-in roll cage, reinforced side rails, impressive side impact door beams, and an enclosed fuel tank. All commonplace items today, but certainly not back then. Another critical element were massive front and rear bumpers, engineered to withstand a 10-mile-per-hour impact with no damage to the car, double the government's 5-mile-per-hour standard. Despite the company's limited resources, early crash tests were promising. Even the doors were touted as a safety feature, swinging up and out of the way to reduce the danger of getting out on a busy street. But that wasn't the only reason Malcolm insisted on having them.
And of course, as soon as you add gull-wing doors, it adds something very magic to any car. Take the ugliest car you ever saw and put some cool doors on it, and you got yourself a cool car. I mean, it's that simple.
Of course, a cool car needs cool colors, but building a paint facility is a massive investment, and Malcolm also wanted a surface that could resist scratches and dents, which led to a radical idea.
And I met with some people from Roman Haas, and they made plastic for bathrooms, sheets of plastic to put on the wall instead of tiles. And that's solid acrylic, that's solid paint. So I said to them, well, how do you do? What do? You vacuum form it. And then for what we need, reinforce it with fiberglass.
With plastic panels reinforced by fiberglass, the body couldn't rust. And since they were solid color the whole way through, minor scratches could just be sanded out. No repainting needed.
And they had 5 colors, that's why I have the colors I got. That's what they gave me, period. And I hated the vomit, I called it that vomitish, not the green, but there was an off-color, greenish, vomity looking thing.
The color he's referring to is called safety suntan. And although it's an odd choice for a car, it wouldn't look out of place in a 1970s bathroom. This car's safety red looks more like orange, but the actual safety orange cars are a much lighter shade. The use of third-party components continued under the car's skin as well. Brakes and suspension were largely sourced from the AMC Hornet. The motor would be a 220 horsepower AMC 360 cubic inch V8. Or at least, that was the plan.
So our people made a deal with them, and we went off and engineered it into our car and did all the safety things necessary. And about 3 months before we're ready to start taking shipments for the delivery, we already had the grand opening, we had 40,000 back orders, we're ready to go. I get notified American Motors will not ship. Will not ship. I just spent $4 million building prototypes and doing the engineering for that engine. Now I wanted to buy 1,000 a month.
According to Malcolm, American Motors suddenly gave him the cold shoulder and refused to deliver the engines he'd already signed a contract for. According to a friend of mine familiar with AMC, Bricklin had been publicly bad-mouthing his supplier to the automotive press, which probably didn't help the situation. Finally, Bricklin got a hold of Bill Luneburg, American Motors' gruff president with a penchant for colorful language.
I called the secretary and I said, this is a life and death situation from my part. I need to talk to Mr. Luneburg. I don't want to make threats, but it would really be smarter to meet me now than have to deal with the press and the lawyers later. Message back, all right, you be here tomorrow at 11 o'clock. We come into his office, he has his vice presidents. I go through the story. We had your word, we did the engineering, they're expecting it a certain date. He said, well, let me tell you a story. I have been here a long time trying to sell cars. It's been hard. I can sell every single car I can build right now. That was a time when for some reason cars were walking out the door faster than you can build them. He said, after all these years, every time I sell you an engine, I lose a car sale. If you think I'm going to sell you engines so that I can't sell my cars, you're out of your mind. I said, well, let me tell you my story, because I'm not going to be out of my mind. I'm going to be out of my business, and I'm going to lose a lot of money. So what you're doing is pushing me out that window. And if I have to do that, I'm grabbing your tie because I'm landing on your stomach when we land. Here's what I'm doing. You don't give me what I want, I go out the door, I get on a plane, and I go to Washington. And I don't leave Washington until they know you're in a conspiracy with the other big three, putting me out of business. And here's my contract, and here's what they did. It's not the way I want to do business, but it is the way I'm going to save my ass if you don't give me what I want.
Let's stop for a moment of context. In the mid-1970s, GM, Ford, Chrysler, and to a lesser extent AMC, still ruled the automotive landscape in the US. Sentiment toward the American automakers was somewhat negative, as many people felt the companies had too much political power and were stiffing consumers with dangerous, unreliable, inefficient vehicles. Some more aggressive critics even advocated breaking up the car companies under antitrust laws. So, Malcolm's scheme of exposing a monopolistic conspiracy does sound a little wild, but it was by no means an empty threat.
And then he started in, who the do you think you are? I mean, you little, and on and on and on. And I said, I don't blame you one bit. What are you going to give me? He said, I'm going to give you 700 cars. And after 700 cars, go yourself.
And so for 1974, Bricklin managed to build 772 SV1s, each with AMC's 360 V8. Most had 3-speed automatic transmissions, although an estimated 155 had 4-speed manuals. The interior used some outsourced components as well. However, this is the only car I've ever seen with a rolling numbers digital clock. It's a super cool touch that I spent far too much time filming, waiting for the perfect shot. Conspicuously absent are an ashtray and a cigarette lighter. Remember, this was the 1970s. But having given it up himself, Malcolm thought smoking was dangerous, especially while driving. According to dealers, that didn't stop SV1 owners from adding their own aftermarket ashtrays and smoking more than just cigarettes in their cars.
Bricklin is a unique car for its time. It has no lighter. It has no cup holders. I'm a non-smoker. Malcolm is a non-smoker. And the truth behind the matter is, we never noticed it missing until we started selling the cars and someone says, "Where's the damn lighter?" And I don't know. So then what we did is we had a beanbag made up with an ashtray on it.
Bricklin lighters and beanbag ashtrays were used as promotional tools to help sell the car once they discovered their mistake. From lemons, you make lemonade.
Stepping over the wide door sills takes some finesse, and the cabin doesn't offer a great deal of room. But it's enough for these owners to take regular road trips. I didn't love the pseudo-suede seats, but they do grip your clothes and keep you from sliding around, which was also marketed as a safety feature. And marketing is where Malcolm Bricklin truly excelled. As the St. John factory slowly began turning out cars, excitement reached a fever pitch. Pre-orders for the SV1 were rolling in, and his visionary idea of a safe, good-looking car was coming true. Of course, innovation rarely goes smoothly. Despite high hopes for a low sticker price, as costs ballooned, the company had to keep raising the MSRP from $4,000 to almost $7,500. The acrylic body panels became a quality nightmare, with up to 60% of the early material being unusable on the cars.
You touch a very tender note. I wonder if anybody's asked you, and I know this would be very, very hard to prove, if, since you do, in a sense, pose a threat, a competitive threat, if you like, to other manufacturers, if they weren't behind or aren't behind in some subtle way inhibiting your success, the big three?
That's a really good question, and I might be naive. I feel that they have not gone out in a concerted effort to do me any harm. Yet I do feel they've done me harm in a different way, and that's known as arrogance. They are so arrogant that nobody else will ever build a car. We get no terms, we must pay cash in advance for any products we buy, and the cost of the things that we do buy from the big three are considerably higher than other people in larger, let's say, themselves would buy, including from the suppliers that supply them. And we don't usually have the choice of suppliers that they do, because very few of them will take us seriously. And although I don't think it's a conspiracy, it still has the same effect of costing us a tremendous amount of money to build an automobile.
Would you not have thought of that before you started? If I'd started out to buy a car and call it the Paul or whatever, I'd have thought, they'll never let me build it. I keep remembering things like the Tucker, the Henry J, other cars. Incidentally, they told me, the fellow that you saw earlier said that Tucker was a really first-rate car. Did you ever see one or have one?
I saw Tucker and I met his son. And he told me what the big three did to him. I really don't think that in today's laws and today, the way people think today, that we were subject to the same kinds of pressure that Tucker was.
There was some discussion, I think, at the end of the 50s, early 60s, on the part of the United States government, saying that if the big three, I think in General Motors' particular case, didn't appear to be open for competition, if you like, there would be some trust-busting activity or try to break up the company a little bit more. Is that so?
Yes, and I believe there are people who are active today trying to do that to the big three. I don't know whether that's good or bad. I do know that it would be a shame if people like myself and possibly a few others weren't able to offer other alternatives of automobiles to the public.
All of these problems were troublesome for a vehicle costing almost as much as a Lincoln Continental. Unfortunately, the company had to spend a boatload of money retooling for the 1975 models, which now used a less potent Ford Windsor V8. At 351 cubic inches, it made 175 horsepower and came with a 3-speed automatic only. Despite the loss of power, the engine in this car runs like a dream. It's hard to believe that underneath this stylish body are suspension parts from the humble AMC Hornet.
This is the kind of car that just begs you to drive faster. You see a twist in the road up ahead, but you don't want to slow down because it's just so much fun to push the limits in a curve. And it's all the more impressive when you think about the Brickland's age, because it's not like there were a lot of American cars you could do this in back in 1975.
A great deal of the credit should go to this car's owner, who's worked tirelessly on every detail of this SV1. It probably runs and drives better now than it did brand new. But even back in the day, a comparison test in Car and Driver magazine proved the Brickland could almost keep pace with a similarly equipped Corvette. Not bad for a company's first car. I have to admit, there are faster cars, there are better handling cars, there are more collectible cars, and yes, there are even safer cars than the Brickland. But driving the SV1 surprised me. I didn't expect an emissions-era sports car with an automatic transmission to be this fun. This Brickland is a genuine alternative to mainstream performance cars from the mid-70s. The Brickland's agile, predictable handling could even be considered a safety feature, if it helps you avoid accidents before they happen. Provided, of course, you could afford an SV1. By 1975, the price had risen to an excruciating $9,980, $3,000 over a Corvette, and well into Cadillac territory. Costs were out of control.
When I was in high school, in the 10th grade, I walked into my high school library, and there on a book rack was this magazine, Car and Driver, with the Brickland having a comparison against the Corvette. And when I saw this, it just got me hooked. I took the magazine, I snuck it out of the high school library and to read it, and I've still got this magazine all these years later.
The editors were pleasantly surprised to find a worthy competitor to the Corvette, writing, "They come off amazingly close, these two American GT coupes. As long as you focus on the performance readout, they are practically identical." For about $10,000, the Brickland came with a long list of standard features.
Rick Remdenach is a Brickland authority. He owns several of these cars. He buys them and sells them. He works on them. He knows them inside and out.
Typical 70s muscle cars type stuff, a little rough, handles okay, nothing compared to the new cars of today, but as of the 70s, it was a pretty normal car.
Rick says the low production numbers make these vehicles very collectible.
Back in 75, 76, I bought one. And I drove it as my daily driver for a couple of years, and it was the biggest piece of crap I ever owned. I said never again, and now I have 9 of them.
Rick owns 9 Bricklands.
Yeah, well, I belong to the Brickland Club. We have a little email ring, and the Bank-O-Spree liquidator who purchased all the leftover parts and all the leftover cars at the time of the factory closing found some parts stuck in the back of one of their warehouses after been sitting for 20 years or 30 years, and I offered to buy them because I happened to be restoring 2 cars at the time. So I went down and bought a tractor trailer load of parts, and while I was there, I said, "Oh, you want some cars?" And they had this and 2 other 76s sitting there brand new. This car had just under 400 miles on it when I bought it, and I said, sure, why not? So I bought this car and the parts, and now I have a whole bunch of cars.
To use Rick's words, he has too many Bricklands.
They're eventually all going to go, except for maybe 1 or 2. Just, there's no sense having a car if you can't drive it.